Hello and welcome. Today we're working on the idea of NPV. How sensitive is it to changes in cost of goods sold and changes in sale, along with changes in the cost of capital or the weighted average cost of capital? Now, this is a continuation of a problem that I did just a few days ago, so I have links in the description below on the capital budgeting using a cash flow model. Now, let's look what we have. We started with a increase in sales of year one. We had a 6-year project. We had cost of goods sold percentage to be 40%, and we had the weighted average cost of capital or the required rate to be 10%. So we developed a 6-year cash flow model, and then based on that, we calculated net present value. So here's what we want to do. How sensitive is that net present value, the NPV of 221, to changes in sales or changes in the cost of goods sold percentage or changes in our cost of capital? All right, so I've just set up a little problem here. Now, here's what we know. Our cost of goods sold is 40% and our cost of capital is 10% based on our original numbers. Now, that's just an estimate at that point. What if our cost of goods sold goes up 10% or 20%? What if it goes down 10% or down 20%? How sensitive is that to changes in net present value? And then what if our cost of capital changes? So here's what we want to do. We're going to use what's called a data table. So if you go to data and then what if analysis, we're going to use a data table. And it's going to have two different row and input. So this is technically called a 2-variable data table. I'll give you a link below if you want to know how data tables work. But this is a way to do this. So all I've done is typed in 6%, 48%, and so on, and I have a little 2x2 grid. Now, one thing I need to do to set this up, I need to show an example of what we're trying to do. So this is 221, that is the net present value. All right? So basically what this data table will do is recalculate net present value at 48% cost of goods sold and 6% cost of capital and so on for all the numbers. And so basically it will go in and use all these calculations, get the net cash flow, and then use the cost of capital to calculate net present value. So it just saves us time rather than trying to input different variables. We can see on one table how this works. All right, so I'm going to highlight everything. And I'm going to go to the data ribbon and go to what if analysis data table. Now look at the two things that we have here. We have the row input. The row input is the 40% and then change it to 44%, 48%. This is our cost of goods sold. So we're going to select this and go to the very top where our original data was, where we said, hey, we want our cost of goods sold to be 40%. And we want our cost of capital to be 10%. So I'm just using those, and Excel will go in and change those numbers to 44% and from 10 to 12% and so on. So let's hit enter. And so what we have is at 40% and at 10%, if our cost of goods sold is 40% and our cost of capital is 10%, we get the original 221, right? So 221 is our standard for the 40% cost of goods sold and the 10% cost of capital. We know if our cost of goods sold goes up, our profit goes down, our net cash flow goes down, and so therefore we're going to have some negative numbers over here. If our cost of capital goes up, our discount rate goes up, then we're going to have more negative numbers. So ideally, we'd love to have a low cost of capital and a low cost of goods sold if we wanted to maximize our net present value. Okay, so let's do this. When we look at it, I can go to the home ribbon, I can go to conditional formatting, and I want to do color scales. And the very first one, I'm going to do green is good, yellow is in between, and red are the small numbers. So if we click on it, you can see visually the worst numbers are the red numbers, and then slightly red, and then orange, and then yellow. The best numbers are to the right, or green. Okay, so this shows how sensitive we are to different changes in cost of goods sold and cost of capital. We're going to do the same thing for sales. So at the very top, let's look at our sales for a minute. We assumed our increase in sales was 1,250,000. So we put just 1,250 because everything's in thousands. And so then we had a 7.5% growth rate over the 6 years. All right, so we're going to recalculate that. We're going to do the data table just like we did before. So I'm going to point to our 221, our net present value, give it an example, and then you're saying, okay, recalculate that 221 if our sales are this number and our percentages for cost of capital are these numbers. So I'm going to highlight everything. You need to highlight the column and the row that includes the labels that we just are showing. Go to the data ribbon, what if analysis, data table, and then the row, that's going to be our sales. We're going to point to that original sales number of 1,250, and we're going to point to our cost of capital. Go all the way back down here. So what we have, our original 1,250, 1,250,000 at 10% is going to be 221. If our sales go down, our net present value goes down. If our sales go up, our net present value goes up. And once again, we know the cost of capital. If cost of capital rises, then our net present value is smaller. So let's highlight this. Let's go to the home ribbon. Let's go to conditional formatting. We can do color scales. Green is good, red is bad. So here we can see basically the sensitivity of our net present value based on our cost of goods sold percentage, that was an estimate, and based on our sales percentage, sales amount, that's an estimate, and then based on the cost of capital. So this is a two-way data table, and we can see the sensitivity of net present value. Net present value is very dependent upon the cost of capital or the discount rate that we select. Hey, thanks for watching. Check out that other video to make sure you know how to calculate the net present value, and we'll see you on the next video. Thumbs up and comment, answer your questions if I can. Thanks for watching.